So important to remember, and this is really important using the zero product property, can only use ZPP when the equation is equal to 0. Really important, major importance. The only time you can use the zero product property is when it's equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, can't use it. So let's do a whole bunch of different examples. Let's refresh our memory back doing the zero product property with something like this. So example 1, we're going to do 45x squared minus 9x equals 0. So the very first thing we need to do is factor. We have to factor first. So a 9 is common to both of them, as well as an x. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm left with 5x minus 1 is equal to 0. So we factored first. Really important to do that in this case. Then the next step we're going to do is we're going to make each factor equal 0. So here we're going to take the first factor, 9x, make that equal to 0, or we can say 5x minus 1 equals 0. Couple things. Notice how we've kept the equal sign as well as equal 0 all the way through, and that we have the two factors on the same line. They're not underneath each other, they're next door to each other, connected by the word or. So that's really important. So for the first one, we're going to divide both sides by 9, and x is equal to 0, or on this one over here, we're going to add 1 to both sides, and we get 5x is equal to 1. Now divide by 5, and we get x is equal to 1/5. So the final solution here is x equals 0 or 1/5. And that's the final answer here. So let's take a look at this example. We have one that's equal to 0, but now instead of just having an a and a b value, we have an a, a b, and a c value. We still got to start out the same way. We've got to factor first. So when we factor, notice how I still keep it equal to 0. I'm going to test out 7x and 2x. So I got to test it out. I got to do guess and check. And I look to see -5. So one of them's got to be negative, but I have to end up with a positive. I got to end up with a positive 33 here. So I kind of already know. So I'm going to go with what I know, that I want to end up with a +5 here and a -1 here. And I can check that out. This times this is a -2x, excuse me, -2x. This times this is positive 35x. So positive 35 plus -2x gives me that -33x. So I'm all set there. The next thing I have to do is make each factor equal to 0. So here, I'm going to take the first factor, 7x minus 1 equals 0, and then write 2x plus 5 equals 0. Since we're solving equations here, we have to make sure that we keep an equal sign throughout the whole thing. We can't go from an equal sign to an expression and then back again. So make sure. I will take off if all the work isn't shown. So in this first one, I'm going to add 1. I get 7x is equal to 1. Excuse me, let me erase that. Is equal to 1. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 7, so x is equal to 1/7. Or I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. So I get 2x equals negative 5. I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and x is equal to negative 5 halves. So now I have both of my answers right here. Okay, this third example, we're going to take a look, and we're going to start out the same way. We need to factor first. But when I look at all three of my factors, I notice that they're all divisible by the same thing. In this case, 3. So this is going to give me 4x squared plus, I believe it's 29. Yep, 29x plus 30 equals 0. Bring down that equals 0. And now I'm going to do is take and factor just what's inside the parentheses. I'm just going to factor what's in the parentheses here. Notice that the 3 just comes down. So I'm just going to take a guess, 4x and x, and then let's do 6 and 5. We'll do plus and plus. And when I take a look at these two multiplied together is 5x. These two multiplied together is 24x. So 24 plus 5 is 29, which gives me that. Notice how I didn't write any of the arrows or check any of that. That's not part of the algebra. So now, just like on examples 1 and 2, we have to make the factors equal to 0. So the first factor is 3 equals 0, or 4x plus 5 equals 0, or x plus 6 equals 0. Well, guess what? We don't even have to write that. Don't even put it down, because that's not even a possibility. 3 cannot equal 0. So now we have just these two factors equaling 0. That makes sense. And we're trying to find out what x is anyways. So we're going to subtract 5 on both sides. 4x is equal to negative 5. Divide both sides by 4. X is equal to negative 5/4. Then we're going to come up here, subtract 6 on both sides. So x equals negative 6. So what we have here are these two answers right there. Finally, we take a look at example 4 and notice that it doesn't equal 0. But if we went back to the very beginning, we said it was very important that our equation had to equal 0. We don't have anything special when it equals 7, so we have to make it equal to 0. So the first thing, make the equation equal to 0. So for us, that means subtracting 7 on both sides. So what that's going to give us is 6x squared plus 40x minus 7 is equal to 0. Now that it equals 0, now we can do the next step, which is factor. Okay? Factor next. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So let's see, I'm going to try 6x and 1x, and I'm going to try plus 7 minus 1. And when I take a look at this, I know that this is negative 1x, this is positive 42, so it will give me the positive 40x. So this is where it's really important to know your multiplication tables, to know how to add and subtract two things quickly in your head. So what I have now are my two factors, 6x minus 1 and then 1x plus 7 equal to 0. And I'm going to make each of them equal to 0. So 6x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 7 equals 0. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. 6x equals 1. Divide both sides by 6. And I get x equals 1/6. Or I subtract 7 on both sides. X equals negative 7. So what I have here are those two answers. So now you know how to use a zero product property to solve. Make sure it's equal to 0. The equation must equal 0 to use the zero product property. Makes sense. Zero product property, got to equal 0.